The invasion began with silence. From the dark edge of the system, the alien fleet drifted forward with the calm certainty of hunters closing in on unsuspecting prey. Their target was not Earth itself, not yet. They wanted the moon. From their perspective, it was the logical first step, a lifeless rock that offered the perfect staging ground for operations. Secure the moon, establish a base, and Earth would be within easy reach. To the invaders, it was strategy made simple. What they didn't understand was that the moon had never been empty. For humans, it had never been just a rock in the sky. It was history, pride, and the first place where their kind had set foot beyond their world. Generations had looked up and seen not just a dead sphere, but a promise. For that reason alone, it had been fortified, quietly, patiently, without fanfare. The aliens expected dust and craters. What they found were shadows hiding eyes, sensors, tracking every movement, and bunkers carved into stone deeper than they could imagine. Humanity had been watching, and when the first alien landing craft broke lunar orbit, the watchers stirred. Weapons long buried came to life. Systems on standby for years hummed into readiness. The silence of the moon was broken by human will. For the invaders, this was supposed to be a straightforward campaign. They had studied Earth's broadcasts, catalogued its technology, and dismissed its defenses. A planet barely reaching into space, with weapons designed for fighting itself, not an interstellar power. They saw no risk, no serious opposition, nothing that could stop them from planting their flag on the moon. But the humans were not what they expected. On Earth, survival had always meant preparing for the worst. That instinct had followed them into orbit, then across the void to the moon, had asked themselves the uncomfortable question, what if we are not alone, and what if the ones who arrive don't come in peace? It was a question most of the galaxy had never bothered to ask, because most species had never lived on a world as hostile as Earth. So when the aliens came, they didn't find a passive rock waiting to be claimed. They found a fortress, hidden. In plain sight, they found soldiers waiting in the shadows, men and women who had trained their whole lives for the day when humanity would no longer be the only hunters. They found that the first step of their grand invasion was already a battlefield and that they were already late to it. This was not an empty conquest. This was the moon, humanity's high ground, and humans were already waiting. To the alien fleet, the campaign was little more than a formality. Their intelligence reports painted Earth as primitive, fractured, and soft. The humans had only recently learned to fling metal shells into orbit. Their space stations were fragile skeletons, their exploration vessels laughably underformed, and their first tentative steps to the moon had been little more than symbolic gestures. In the invaders' eyes, these were not warriors. They were children. The moon therefore seemed like the perfect starting point. It sat in plain view of Earth, unguarded and defenseless. The aliens saw it as both a psychological and tactical prize. If they seized the moon, humanity would see their flag in the sky every night, a constant reminder of submission. Militarily, it was a simple matter. The moon offered high ground, a platform to project force, and a staging area from which Earth could be struck at will. The fleet's commanders expected little resistance. They had crushed more advanced civilizations with ease, and humans, Deathworlders, though they might be, were, in their estimation, still bound to their planet by gravity and fear. A species that argued endlessly among itself, that spilled blood over borders and ideology, could not possibly unite to defend a barren rock. As they approached, the aliens admired the simplicity of their plan. Their landing craft would descend, deploying mechanized infantry and mobile artillery. Orbital cruisers would establish dominance above, sweeping away any feeble human satellites or defense craft. Within days, the moon would be secured. Within weeks, Earth itself would be forced to surrender, its people too overwhelmed to even consider resistance. In their council chambers, the alien strategists had laughed at the very idea of danger. The humans are emotional, unpredictable, yes, but in war, they are disorganized. They lack focus. They are not like us. The others had nodded in agreement. The humans' reputation as survivors, as stubborn fighters, was dismissed as myth, born of desperation. Against a fleet armed with the latest weapons, no amount of human grit could matter. Their overconfidence blinded them. They studied Earth's surface, but not the tunnels beneath it. They analyzed broadcasts, but not silences. They saw the moon as empty, but never considered that emptiness might be deliberate. Their eyes looked outward with arrogance, never inward with caution. For the alien soldiers aboard the transports, this was supposed to be an easy victory, the kind of campaign used to train recruits or give commanders quick prestige. Some even looked forward to it as sport. They spoke of hunting humans across their barren moon, of raising banners on the craters, of turning humanity's first step into space into their last. When their sensors showed no orbital defenses, no visible weapons, their confidence grew. Pathetic, one commander muttered as the fleet tightened formation. They don't even know how to protect their doorstep. But arrogance is the surest path to surprise. As the fleet descended toward lunar orbit, not one of them realized they were already under observation. Not one of them imagined that their every move had been tracked, their signals decoded, their approach anticipated. Not one of them considered that humans might have already prepared for this very moment. From the alien perspective, it was victory assured. From humanity's perspective, it was the moment they had been waiting for. Long before the alien fleet ever darkened the edge of the solar system, humanity had already asked itself the question that no other species thought to ask. What if someone comes? It wasn't paranoia without cause. Human history was filled with invasions, one people marching against another, seizing land, resources, and power. On Earth, civilizations had risen and fallen because they failed to prepare for threats they didn't believe would come. That history had left scars, and those scars carried upward as humanity reached into space. For years, the moon had been more than a symbol, it was the high ground. Militaries knew it, scientists knew it, politicians knew it too, though they spoke of peaceful exploration in public. Quietly, budgets were shuffled, projects approved, and construction authorized. Officially, they were research stations, mining projects. Unofficially, they were the skeleton of something much larger. The first layer of defense was surveillance. Humanity built an invisible net of sensors around the Earth-Moon system, radar telescopes, listening posts all linked together to detect anything that moved, no matter how stealthy. What the aliens dismissed as primitive satellites were, in fact, nodes in a defense web. By the time the fleet entered the system, humanity had been tracking them for weeks. The second layer was infrastructure. On the surface of the moon, at first glance, there was nothing unusual. Dust, craters, the wreckage of old missions. But beneath the regolith, tunnels extended for kilometers, carved with machines meant for mining, reinforced with alloys that could withstand bombardment. These bases housed soldiers, weapons, and stockpiles of supplies. To the aliens' sensors, the moon looked dead. To humans, it was alive and waiting. Then came the weapons themselves. Railguns buried in craters, their barrels disguised as shadows. Missile silos concealed under automated mining rigs. Drone bays, hidden beneath layers of rock, ready to unleash swarms into the void. None of it was flashy. None of it was obvious. That was deliberate. The best defense, humans knew, was surprise. And finally, there were the people. Soldiers rotated through lunar duty in secret, their presence disguised under the cover of training missions. They trained in low-gravity combat, learned to move through tunnels in silence, and adapted to fight in suits where a single tear could mean death. These weren't conscripts. They were volunteers, men and women who knew they might be the first line of defense for their species. To outsiders, humanity often seemed chaotic, divided, endlessly at odds with itself. But when threatened, when pushed to the edge, something strange always happened. They unified. Rival nations set aside disputes, old enemies shared intelligence, and resources flowed to a common cause. The moon was proof of that instinct. Every major power had contributed to its defense, not for glory, not for conquest, for survival. So, when the alien fleet entered orbit, humanity wasn't surprised. They had been waiting. In the bunkers, alarms sounded softly, not with panic but with readiness. Railgun crews strapped in, pilots sealed their suits. Commanders gave orders they had rehearsed countless times before. The aliens believed they were about to seize an undefended rock. What they didn't realize was that they were about to land on humanity's shield. A shield built not from arrogance, but from the one lesson Earth had taught its children again and again. Never assume you are safe. On Earth, survival required preparation. On the moon, it would mean victory. The first alien landing craft broke through lunar orbit like a safety point to their commanders. The silence from the surface was confirmation of weakness. No warning signals, no countermeasures, no challenge. Their confidence swelled as they guided their transports toward the gray dust below. Inside the bunkers, human soldiers waited in stillness. The moon had no atmosphere to carry sound, so the rumble of engines was absent. But through sensors and screens, they tracked every descent, every flicker of heat, every shadow that crossed the craters. Fingers hovered over triggers, breath condensed. In helmet glass, the invaders thought they were unseen. They weren't. The first wave of alien troops deployed onto the regolith. Their boots sank into powder untouched by humans since Apollo. To them it was a moment of triumph. They raised banners, planted equipment, and prepared to establish their forward base. Their confidence was absolute. Then the ground beneath their feet erupted. From hidden shafts, drones poured upward like a swarm of hornets, their engines screaming in the vacuum. Railguns buried deep in the rock, fired with a thunderclap no ear could hear, but every sensor registered. The first shot speared through an alien transport, tearing it apart in a burst of fire and debris. Another beam followed, then another. The invaders' landing zone became a killbox. Alien infantry scrambled for cover. But cover was a luxury the moon did not offer. Craters they thought empty spat missiles. Dust clouds hid automated turrets. Every shadow concealed a weapon waiting to strike. Above, orbital cruisers shifted into attack formation, their captains barking orders to suppress the resistance. But as they fired, streaks of light shot upward from the surface. Missiles launched from silos hidden under regolith punched through the vacuum, homing in on heat signatures. One cruiser took a direct hit, its shields buckling, its engines flaring out. Another lost power as a railgun slug tore into its hull. The aliens had expected resistance measured in minutes. Instead, in the first minutes of battle, they were losing ships. On the ground, the clash turned brutal. Human soldiers emerged from tunnels, their armor coated in lunar dust, weapons calibrated for low gravity. They moved with precision, leaping from cover to cover in long bounding strides that no alien had trained to counter. Every squad had drilled for years in this environment. For them this was not improvisation, it was routine. Alien troops tried to regroup, but they were disoriented. Their equipment was designed for conventional terrain, not the strange pull of lunar gravity. They stumbled where humans surged. They hesitated where humans advanced. And hesitation on the battlefield is a death sentence. A firefight broke out. Across the landing zone, lasers carved bright lines across the dark. Explosions sent fountains of dust into the skies as void. Through it all, human comms buzzed with calm, clipped voices. Orders flowed, targets marked, attacks coordinated. The invaders were shocked not only by the ferocity of the resistance, but by its discipline. This isn't possible, one alien commander snarled over the fleet's comms. They're too organized, too prepared. But possible or not, it was happening. The moon, which they had seen as defenseless, had become a fortress that bled them at every step. Every meter forward was paid for in fire and wreckage. By the time the first wave of invaders tried to retreat to their transports, half their landing craft had been destroyed. Orbit was no safer. Human railguns continued to reach upward, dragging more ships from the sky. The aliens had walked into what they thought was a conquest. Instead, they had entered a trap sprung by a species that had been waiting for this exact moment. The first clash was not a battle, it was a message. Humanity had heard their challenge, and they had answered. At first, humanity's plan had been simple: hold the line, make the moon unassailable, bleed the enemy until they gave up. But war has a way of changing momentum, and by the end of the first clash, one truth had become clear: the invaders were not invincible, they could be broken. Commanders inside the lunar bunkers didn't miss the opportunity. We've held them back, one officer said, eyes fixed on a tactical display. Now we drive them off. The order spread like a spark through dry grass. Defenders shifted into attackers. Units that had been holding craters surged outward. Drone swarms that had been programmed for defense were redirected toward the fleet above. Humanity stopped waiting. Humanity advanced. The aliens had no time to adapt. Their strategy had been built on assumption, not contingency. They thought they would land unopposed, build freely, and only then deal with resistance. Instead, their landing zones were craters of fire, their transports wreckage scattered across the regolith. And now, the humans were coming for them. From tunnels beneath the surface, armored vehicles crawled upward, their treads digging into dust that had lain untouched for eons. These weren't massive tanks, they didn't need to be. They were lean, efficient machines, designed to maneuver in low gravity and strike fast. Mounted cannons punched holes in alien armor, while missile pods hunted fleeing troops. Above, the railguns switched focus. No longer content to fire defensively, they targeted orbital cruisers directly. Each slug accelerated to a fraction of light speed, invisible until impact, and when it hit, alien ships shuddered and tore open like fruit. One after another, the proud fleet began to falter. The invaders tried to regroup, but the humans pressed every weakness. Their soldiers exploited low gravity, bounding across the battlefield in movements that seemed erratic to alien eyes but were calculated, practiced, deadly. Small squads hit hard and fast, then vanished back into tunnels before a counterstrike could land, or it was asymmetric warfare at its finest. The aliens had come expecting open conquest, and instead they found themselves fighting ghost foes who appeared from shadows, struck with precision, and disappeared again. The moon itself seemed alive, fighting alongside its human defenders. In orbit, the situation was no better. Hidden platforms rose from the surface, deploying attack drones into the void. They darted between ships, too small and too fast to be easily targeted, carrying payloads that latched onto alien hulls and detonated with surgical violence. Cruisers that had once loomed over the battlefield now reeled under constant assault for the first time. Panic began to spread among the invaders. Their commanders barked orders to hold formation, to press harder, but the truth could no longer be ignored. The humans had taken control. The invasion was collapsing. And perhaps the most dangerous thing of all was the humans' resolve. Every soldier, every pilot, every technician on that moon fought with the knowledge that failure meant extinction. There was no fallback, no retreat, no surrender. This was not just about defending a base, it was about defending Earth itself. That kind of determination couldn't be measured in troop numbers or firepower. It was the kind of determination that breaks empires. By the battle's third day, the moon was no longer contested ground. It was a graveyard for alien ambition. Their landing sites had been reduced to wreckage, their fleet scattered, their commanders forced into desperate retreats. And humanity stood taller than ever. What began as defense had become offense. What began as survival had turned into dominance. The aliens had come to the moon believing it would be their first step toward conquering Earth. Instead, it became humanity's first step toward showing the galaxy that Earth was not prey, it was a predator. When the last alien ship limped out of orbit, trailing fire across the black sky, the moon fell quiet again. No more railgun fire shook the regolith. No more drones screamed upward from their bunkers. Only the silence of space returned, broken only by the faint hum of machinery still running beneath the surface. But the silence was deceptive. Something had shifted, not just on the moon, not just on Earth, but across the stars. The invasion had been intended as a swift conquest, a reminder to humanity of its fragility. Instead, it became a story, a warning carried on every transmission, whispered in every council chamber, and studied by every military strategist in the galaxy. But the aliens had expected to plant their banner on the moon and declare victory. What they planted instead was fear in their own ranks. Never again would they underestimate the species of Earth. Never again would they see the pale rock in the sky as just a stepping stone. The moon was now a fortress, and its defenders had proven themselves not just survivors, but warriors. On Earth, the aftermath was a mixture of grief and triumph. Families mourned the soldiers who never returned, but they did so with pride. Every loss carried weight, but every life given had helped ensure billions more could go on living. Cities across the planet paused as news spread. Humanity had faced its first interstellar invasion and had not only survived, it had won. The political landscape shifted overnight. Nations that once bickered over borders and resources found common ground in the shadow of the moon. Old rivalries seemed trivial compared to what they had faced together. Treaties were signed, alliances strengthened, and new projects drafted. If the invaders came again, humanity would not only be ready, they would be united. For the soldiers who had fought in the tunnels and craters, the memory of the battle lingered. Some carried scars, others carried silence, but all carried the knowledge that they had stood on the edge of extinction and refused to fall. Their children would look up at the moon and know that it was not just a symbol of exploration, but of defiance. In the broader galaxy, the ripple effects were even greater. Other species watched the footage, intercepted the signals, and read the reports. They had seen the arrogance of the invaders and the fury of humanity. For some, it was a lesson in caution, do not provoke the death. For others, it was a beacon. Perhaps humanity could be an ally, a bulwark against oppression. And for the invaders themselves, their empire would carry the shame of the moon for generations. Every strategy meeting, every debate in their halls of power would be haunted by the same question: how did we lose to them? The answer was simple, though they could never fully accept it. They lost because humans were not what they expected. They were not passive, not primitive, not easy prey. They were a species shaped by hardship, sharpened by history, and hardened by a world that had never given them peace. In the end, the moon was not just a battlefield. It was a statement. It told the galaxy that Earth was no longer a quiet backwater to be overlooked. It told every would-be conqueror that humanity did not wait to be rescued or submit to inevitability. It told the invaders themselves the most dangerous truth of all, that humans had been waiting, that so when people on Earth looked up at the night sky, at that familiar gray sphere, they saw it differently than before. No longer just a place of dreams, or the first step into space. It had become a shield, a reminder, and a promise. The promise that if anyone came again, humanity would not hide. They would be ready.